In this lesson, we're gonna make our program dynamic. In order to do that, we need to talk about variables. Variables are used to store information. That information can be, for example, a line of text, the name of a person, or a number. There are several data types that can be stored in a variable, and we will talk about each of them in the next lessons. For now, let's focus on how to use variables. To create one, we just have to pick a name, for example, age, followed by the equal sign, and now the value we want to assign to this variable. I'm 32 years old, so I will assign 32 as the value of this variable. Now we have a variable called age that is keeping that value for us. When we want to use it, we just call it by name, so we can pass it through the print function. Or we can do it even better. We could print something like I'm, then use the variable age, and then years old, and now we are using our variable in the middle of the text. Before we go ahead and use variables in our program, let's learn some rules we must follow when naming variables. So the first rule is, variable names can contain letters, numbers, and underscores. So we cannot use special characters like $signs, quotation marks, slashes, dashes, or anything like that. Spaces are also not allowed. Variable names can't start with numbers. Although numbers are accepted, a variable name can't start with a number, so we can only start variables with letters and underscores. Variable names are case sensitive. Like I said in the previous lesson, Python is a case-sensitive language. So if we create a variable called age, and we try to call it by age with a capital A, Python is not going to find it, and it will result in an error. Last, we can't use reserved words. So we learned there's a function called print in Python. This means we cannot create a variable called print. Technically, we could create a variable called print with a capital P, as this is not the same thing. But to avoid confusion, try not to do that. Here is a list of a few more reserved words. If you want to know more, just type Python reserved words on Google. Another important remark I want to make is that the values of variables are dynamic. They can be changed. So now we have a variable called age that has the value of 32. If we want to change it, we can just assign a new value to it. So now, if I run this again, we see that the value has changed. Alright, let's use variables inside our program. Before saying what the numbers are, let's create two variables. Let's call it x equals 4 and y equals 8. Do you see any problem using those variable names? Although x and y are valid names for a variable, they aren't a good choice in this case. You should always choose variable names that mean something, that say something about what that variable is for. If you pick names like x, y, var, it's going to be hard to maintain your code. When the program gets bigger, there will be a lot of confusion. So let's change those names to more meaningful ones. In this case, number 1 and number 2 are better choices. Now we can use it inside our print functions. So here, let's use number 1 and number 2. In the next line, let's also change the static numbers for our variables. Let's save it using Command S or Control S, and now run it pressing F5. That's a bit better. Now we can change the value of the variables. So let's put 10 and 19, run it again. We should save it first. Now it's changing the values on this line, and it's calculating a new average. This is a bit better, but our program is still static, and we'll always use those numbers unless we change the value of the variables inside the code. In the next lesson, we will learn how to assign user input to our variables and make our program dynamic. I'll see you then.